All right, Kevin, so this is a big week for you guys. Is there one position right now that's maybe top heavy in the draft that you think's maybe the strength of this draft?
I think you can look at the draft, and historically, it's usually stronger on the perimeters. Offensive tackle is much stronger than the interior offensive line. There's always a number of receivers in the draft, albeit at different levels. But there's always a good number of wide receivers, and that corresponds to the number of defensive backs that are in the draft too, both safeties and corners, because the way the college game is evolving, again, it's more of a lateral type of game. There's more receivers and more defensive backs that have become significant players.
So, with everything changing right now, are there a couple positions that you're targeting for higher in the draft?
We'll continue to look at. We're never going to narrow our perspective. We know where we'd maybe like to go, but again, as I said with the writers, as you go through free agency, and you maybe accomplish some things you did want to do in free agency, then maybe you don't have to do it in the draft. So when we're here, we're taking a comprehensive view as anybody. Because you have to know every position, whether you're drafting it or not, because the position of a quarterback may determine the position of a receiver if he's stacked accordingly on your board.
So I guess your plan could change. Is it hard to maybe evaluate the whole process not knowing what the unknown is with a guy like Antonio Brown?
Yeah, it does, because, again, this thing changes day to day, week to week. Free agency through to the draft. The draft's not till the end of April. So what can happen in the next 2 months, all we can do is make some predictions and then follow it and adjust as need be.
You said you had about 3 teams that were interested for Brown beforehand. Has the interest grown, and is it good to see guys face-to-face here? You'll get to see your counterparts with other teams and maybe talk face-to-face about his worth.
Yeah, I don't want to get into specific numbers and keep score as to how many teams are interested. I will say everything is very preliminary at this point, because teams are doing the same things we're doing, as I spoke just before, about their own free agency evaluations, combine draft evaluations. When they start putting that together, then they factor in, okay, this is what's available. These are who are available by trade, and how do they compare to what we may be able to do in free agency or the draft. So, as I said, the one thing that doesn't change is Antonio Brown's value, because he's still one of the best players in the league.
Has interest grown, though? Have you seen that?
In casual type conversations, again, we don't do specific meetings. We don't really call at this point. Usually if someone's interested, they're going to come to you. And again, that is starting to pick up, and we'll see where it goes throughout the week.
This seems like a unique situation. Have you ever been involved in something similar to this where you don't know what's going to happen, and it's kind of unique?
I guess it is. We haven't been, fortunately, at least in recent times. So, again, we just have to stick to what our mission is. Our mission is to win a Super Bowl for the Pittsburgh Steelers, nothing else. We want our players to be happy. We want our scouts to be happy. Our coach. We want everybody to be happy. But ultimately, we have to win the Super Bowl for everybody to accomplish their goal. Players, coaches, personnel people, management, ownership, everybody has the same focus. So if you stay true to your mission, to your focus, the different situations that arise, if you just stay consistent and understand and try to manage each one as it evolves, then hopefully you'll get the job done.
With Antonio Brown, do you feel forced into making a deal before March 18th, or can that happen after that?
No, there's no time constraint. Again, a deal could happen today if it benefits us. It may extend into who knows when, but it's always going to have to benefit us, because if we don't do right by the organization, then I'm not doing my job.
2 years ago, this team looks a little bit different. Is it disappointing that you're losing a couple guys like that were a big part of this team?
Sure. Every year, again, most teams go through a 16 to 20 player turnover from year to year, and we've had great players come through. I feel bad for the players because we didn't get them the same experience that some of us have had, winning a Super Bowl. So I'd like for them all to experience that as they go through their careers. So in all honesty, I feel a little worse for the players that haven't experienced it and may not as we move forward, because if we're fortunate enough to to get back and win a Super Bowl, then I think we all could have benefited, and hopefully we got the right guys to do it.
If you can't get what you want, do you think you guys can repair that relationship?
I think any relationship is repairable. Again, a player can go from a play to the next play, from a game, early in a game to late in a game, one game to the next, one season to the next. And a lot of times their attitudes, their feelings, they change as they sit back and reflect on what they still want to accomplish and how they can best accomplish that. So I think any relationship is repairable, especially in an ownership group like the Rooneys or a head coach like Mike Tomlin.
Do you feel comfortable with your cap number right now?
It is what it is. It'll change. It'll change every time we sign somebody or if we release somebody. All that can, or we renegotiate with somebody, it changes. So we just have to be in flux and always be, obviously, in compliance.
Any closer to restructuring Ben's contract or a contract extension with him?
No, I think that's a process that we have to go through. The player has to be satisfied. The team has to be satisfied. The one thing I am confident is that both sides want the same thing, for Ben to finish his career here. So usually when you got both sides wanting the same thing, it's just a matter of time.
Do you come in this week with a set number of guys that you want to talk to or look at, or do you kind of just let the week unfold?
Well, we can only interview 60 in the formal interview, so we have to put that request in 2 weeks before we get here. So we'll have those 60 interviews, but our assistant coaches and scouts can also do informal interviews in a different setting. So we try to touch base with as many guys as we can. The on-the-field stuff, of course, that's managed. But the thing that I really value is the interaction with the player, the kid we haven't seen under the helmet, we've never spoken to. Now we get to understand what kind of, not only person he is, but what kind of football personality he may have, and that's very valuable.
Is this one of those years best available athlete early on?
Who knows? I mean, that's always going to be our philosophy. We go into it with a mindset, this is what's worked for us before. We'll see where it goes. I mean, we're always going to look at trading up, trading back, any situation. But again, if it benefits us, great.
Do you feel like you have to find an inside linebacker or, maybe a replacement for Ryan Shazier this year in the draft?
I think we'd like to complement the guys we have. We have a young man like L.J. Fort who's a unrestricted free agent, and I'd like to keep him in the mix. So there's value in, let's add to that group, because the more depth you add, the more competition you add, that group will play. I mean, it'll get better with the competition. But we have Vince Williams, we had John Bostic, as I mentioned, LJ contributed last year, and they did a nice job. They really did. They did some really good things. Did they do everything that we all wanted to accomplish? Of course not, because we were 9-6-1 and not in the playoffs. But we'll never just say that was one position, because it's never one side of the ball. It's never one position.
Last question. So who are you going to draft in the first round?
Burt Lawton.